In this installment of the Manfrotto Fast Tripod campaign breakdown, we're going to be looking at the post-production side of things, looking at what I did in Davinci, where we pushed, where we pulled to make everything work. Now obviously a lot of the shots that we're dealing with are things which we just captured on location and we couldn't influence the lighting, we didn't have the time or the crew to bring in anything to modify things particularly. Now that is especially true of this opening shot, which is obviously filmed on drone, and it's actually filmed in the daytime. So we're going to dive in, have a look at what I've done to make it feel like it's a little bit more early morning vibe. Let's take a look. First of all, I'm just going to take off the grade that's on this. Ben filmed this on a DJI Mavic 2 Pro, so we have a decent file to work with. It's got a nice sensor, it's got a nice lens, so we've got quite a lot of detail in this shot that we can pull back. So that's everything off, and then this is bringing the grade back on. We can see that I've obviously darkened everything down quite a bit, but there are a couple of other little touches that I've added in as well. Let's take them off one at a time. So I've actually got the LUT last in the chain at the moment. I'm going to leave that on for the minute just so that we can see what all of the other things are doing with a little bit more detail. So just here, second from last, I'm doing a bit of a correction to make everything cooler. So everything is white balanced off really nicely just there actually. It feels like the snow is white, we've got some blue in the sky, but I wanted it to feel a little bit cooler. So I just pulled in, and we can see if we go down to primaries just here, pulled in a tiny bit of blue on those so that everything just takes on that slightly colder look throughout the snow just there. Take that off. Here I'm doing a correction to the sky, and that is warming the sky up a little bit and then pulling the level down. So for this I've gone in, added a power window, feathered that off, and then I have just made a couple of corrections within the primary wheels just here, brought down the saturation a little bit, changed the hue a little bit so that we get a slightly warmer feel with it, and it brings down that sky so it doesn't feel so much like it's the middle of the day. Now we do still have a little bit of blue up there. I didn't pull it all out because I didn't want it to feel too unnatural. So that's just a little bit of blue, and then we've got this area in the middle which is quite bright. So it feels like maybe there's a little bit of sun starting to peek in there. Take that one off. And now we get into the real deception. I have actually gone in and added, you can see just there. In fact, if I full screen this, we can really see what's going on. Now, as I turn it on and off, you're going to notice it's really obvious that this is fake. Take that off. Had I realized I was going to do this in the grade, I would have made sure that all of the running lights on the car were on, so we had the tail lights in there and everything as well. As it turns out, I didn't consider this shot for this part of the film until we actually got to the edit, and that's just the way it is sometimes. You see something and you think, wow, it would be really cool if this kind of had a morning vibe, like the cars driving out. The only way to sell that is if we have the effect of those headlights in there. So what have I done? It's pretty straightforward. Gone into the power windows, curves tool, drawn the curves out like that, and then I've tracked it to the car. And that's pretty easy to do in Resolve. We just go into the tracker, set the tracker to window, let it track out the car, and bada bing, bada boom, you are done. I'm going to disable this node, and we're going to have a go at doing that. So just bring a new node in there. Go to the power window, and what I'm going to do is actually start off and draw something which is a little bit rough around the car like that. I want to make sure that I've got the car in shot to track onto, because you're not going to be able to track it if you're not on it. Then we just track forwards, good, track backwards, that's fine, and then from there I can readjust everything and make sure that this is going where I want it to go. Now this is going to be super rough. I'm not going to draw out the whole thing because it did take a little bit of finessing to get it to where it was, and obviously I feathered it off a bit and made it slightly more convincing. Soft inside, boom, a little bit of that, and then you can just go in and brighten things up a bit. You can add a little bit of color to it as well. And just select another node so we can see what it's doing. There you go. Now that's not completely perfect, but with a bit of time finessing and getting the shaping on that, we'd actually find that it does a passable job like this one does. And I've been a little bit more subtle. I was a bit heavy-handed in that example. For the time it's on screen, most people aren't going to notice that it's fake, so that's just fine. Something you can do if you are finding that what you're doing is a little bit too obvious is come over to the key window and then just dial the gain down on the key output, and that at the moment is at 512. You can dial it right up. So that's where I started building the node out, and then, in fact, actually it's probably about here on 1 that I started at, and then I've taken it all the way down to 512. And that was where I obviously felt that it was feeling more natural. Pretty subtle, but very effective. And then the first node we've got is the large correction of everything that's happening to the whole scene. So you can see it's super bright just there. And all I've done is jump into the primary wheels, and I have brought the offset down, and that's pretty much it. Just changed the exposure level of the scene, so it now plays much further down, the car is much darker, and then everything that I do after that is just building on it, and obviously the LUT sits on the end just to give everything the correct level of contrast and saturation. Yeah, I experimented around with a couple of different things on this, but I think that that worked the best, and when you go on to the next shot, we see that everything feels very similar.